Hi everyone, welcome to my first episode of the Applecrafts channel where I talk about a little bit of everything. I have my little notes behind my phone because I have nobody to video this but me, so it's going to be interesting episodes in the future. But my plans for my public YouTube blog is to talk about what I do and keep it real in the process. And by keeping it real, I pretty much mean I don't wear a lot of makeup. I dress in my jammies pretty much every day, and so that this is my life. And I'm not going to try to make nice backgrounds and whatever. I'm just going to introduce you into my life, and you can take it as it is. But my plans for this blog is to talk about all my interests. So there'll be a little bit of baking, a little bit of gardening, knitting, crochet, maybe some cross stitch, as I plan to get back into my cross stitch. Yeah, things like that. So this episode today is going to be about cinnamon rolls without using a mixer. Now, I have a counter mixer, you know, the big KitchenAid type things, except it's not KitchenAid, but you know what I mean. And so I'm used to baking that way. I was a baker for 17, 18 years of my life. And so I like to play around in the kitchen. And, you know, just like other bakers, you have your strengths and your weaknesses. So I'm primarily a cake baker, but I like to do a little bit of bread baking and Danish baking as well. This episode is going to be about cinnamon rolls without using a mixer because this episode is dedicated to my niece Julia, who I told when I went to go visit her a couple weeks ago we were going to make cinnamon rolls, and it didn't happen. So I was like, well, I'm going to make a video and make a fool of myself because I've never really done this before. And I'm going to show you how to make cinnamon rolls without a mixer. And since I've already filmed some of that, it's a hot mess, I'll be honest. This is what happens when I do things without having coffee first, and it's early in the morning. And it is so, oh my God, you might laugh your butt off. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But so this episode is dedicated to my niece Julia. Happy birthday. Her birthday was yesterday. And enjoy. Bye. Okay, for the cinnamon rolls, you're going to need 2¼ teaspoons of yeast, half a cup of water, 3/4 cup of milk, 1/3 cup of butter. You want to make sure it's soft or room temperature, 1/4 cup of sugar, 1¼ teaspoons of salt, 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, 1/8 of a teaspoon of clove, half a teaspoon of vanilla, 3 cups of flour. That's just for the dough. Now, in a separate bowl, you want to have for the filling 1/4 cup of sugar, 1/4 cup of brown sugar. Make sure it's packed. 3 tablespoons of flour, 1½ teaspoons of cinnamon, ½ teaspoon of allspice, and 4 teaspoons of cold butter. I should mention that for the yeast, you want something like this. It doesn't have to be in a jar this big. They do have in packets, like little, I don't remember how big they are because I haven't gotten the packets in years, but they're little packets. They're individual serving sizes, if you will, and you want 1 packet of those if you're not going to use something like this. And if you are going to use something like this, make sure you get active dry yeast, not the rapid rise. You want something like this. Okay, as you can see in this bowl, I've got my yeast, and then I've got my milk. So what you're going to do is you're going to put the milk into the bowl of yeast. Make sure you have a whisk, and you're going to stir it. Now, if you want to make vegan cinnamon rolls, I like to use Earth Balance, this kind right here. And then I just use an alternative milk. This one is soy, but you can also use almond milk, coconut milk, cashew milk, anything like that. Make sure you measure out all your ingredients. This is my my spices for the dough. I also add a little bit of cinnamon. You can do that if you want. If you decide you want to add cinnamon to the dough, I would not do more than 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon. Flour. And then in here I have the start of my filling. I haven't finished doing that yet, but make sure you've got your filling measured out in a separate bowl as well. Now typically when you work with yeast, you use warm water, like the type of temperature that you would put a baby in for a bath. But dough like croissants and cinnamon rolls, they use milk. So milk is basically your water. Sometimes the milk doesn't have to be warm. Sometimes it does. For this recipe, it doesn't have to be warm. I just took the chill off in the microwave and put it in for 20 seconds. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. So you're just going to let the yeast sit in here for a good 2 or 3 minutes so that the yeast wakes up, because right now it's kind of like in a sleep state, and the milk kind of helps it go, ooh, what's this? I'm going to wake up now. So let that go on, and then while that's going on, you can finish measuring out all your ingredients if you haven't done that yet, like I have. So I'm going to finish measuring out my ingredients, and I'll be right back. After your yeast and milk has been sitting together and blooming and being happy, you're going to add your sugar and spices. Give it a nice whisk. And then you can ignore the people in the background while I'm trying to do this with one hand. Alright, you're going to put in your ½ teaspoon of vanilla. Give that a little whisk. Now make sure you have your spoon handy right away, because once you start adding in the flour, you got to start mixing. And this is where it gets fun, because like I said, I'm used to using a mixer, and so I'm going to need 2 hands for this. But I'm going to say, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to mix this until it's completely mixed together, like incorporated. And then I'm going to use my hands, maybe, we'll see, to get a little bread kneading done. It's also a good time to add your butter while you're mixing this in. This, if you're going to add it in earlier, you know, put it before the flour or during the flour, doesn't matter. This is a 1/3 cup. I just don't have a 1/3 cup measuring thing because I don't know what happened to it. Okay, so this is the consistency of the cinnamon dough when you mix it. So you want to mix this for a good few minutes. I'm going to go ahead and mix this for a while. I'm not going to use my hands after all, because I'm going to assume that most people who are watching this ridiculous video don't have gloves at home. If you do, go ahead and use your hands, because it's going to be easier to knead this with your hands. But if you don't, then go ahead and use a spoon. It's probably going to take a little bit longer with the spoon than with your hands, but at the end I will show you what the consistency should look like before you let the dough rest. Where troubleshooting comes in, because unlike with cooking, with baking, sometimes your consistency is not going to be what's in the recipe, and so sometimes you need to add more liquid or less liquid, and sometimes you need to add a little bit more flour or less flour. And in this case, because it's really humid outside, I'm going to have to add a little bit more flour. So I'm adding in a tablespoon of flour, because as you can see in my bowl, I have all this left over, and what you should have is nothing. It should look like pretty much like this by the time you're done kneading. So if you've got this going on, go ahead and add a tablespoon of flour, and if you still have that going on, do about a teaspoon until you don't have any more of this going on. Now as you can see, that tablespoon was all I needed, because let me get my I'll get a knife over here. The bottom of the bowl is not like how it was. This is just a little bit of flour residue, but here, that's what you want to see in your bowl. So what you're going to do after that, once you get to this consistency, is you want to get plastic wrap, cover the bowl, let it sit in a warm place. It doesn't have to be super hot. You can put it in a cold place if you don't have a warm place. It's just going to take longer to double in size. Once it doubles in size, we'll come back and I'll show you what to do. Okay, as you can see, the dough has doubled in size. So what you want to do is you're going to punch it down. Kind of fold it a little bit. I'm doing this one-handed so it's awkward, but you want to fold it down until it deflates. And then you're going to cover it up with the plastic again until it rises double in size again. And once it does that, you're going to punch it down again, but after that we're going to take it out of the bowl and we're going to roll it, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so I put a series of pictures of step-by-step what to do with your dough. Don't throw away your plastic wrap because you're going to need that after you cut your cinnamon roll pieces because it's got to proof again. So I'm going to show you how to roll your cinnamon dough. Now this is the mix, and you just kind of spread it out, leave yourself some dough on the outsides. Now if you want to put raisins in here or nuts or whatever, this is the time to do it. Otherwise, you're going to take this part and start folding it in and then do the corners. Now at this point you want to kind of pull a little bit and turn. Pull and turn. And then when you start getting these things, you go in, fold them in a little bit, pull and turn. Pull and turn. And this takes a little bit of practice. I had a job where I had to do this with a lot of different breads, and trust me, it takes weeks of doing this every day before you even get it. And it's been a long time since I've done it, so I'm a little out of practice, but this is the technique. Then you want to make sure you have a 9x11 casserole dish. Make sure you spray it. And if you don't have a dough cutter, let me show you what a dough cutter looks like. If you don't have one of these, you can use one of these. So you can start very slowly slicing, kind of like a butterfly, like if you're butterflying chicken. You want to butterfly your cinnamon roll pieces and start laying it out on the casserole dish. Now if you like to have them not touching, you may want to put less in here or get 2 casserole dishes. If you like to have them where they pull apart from each other, then you can just do 3 by, it's probably going to be 3 by 5. I don't know if I made enough for that, but even if you didn't make enough for it, if you just do this, then you just have edges that are rounded out and baked all the way around without having that inside part where you pull it apart. Kind of like baking rolls in an oven for Thanksgiving. If you like the pull apart style. You could also double your filling if you want. I don't, because I don't like a lot of sugar. And this is just enough where there's cinnamon rolls with sugar in it for the family, and there's end pieces that don't have a whole lot of the sugar filling in it for me. And since I have 2 pieces left, I'm going to do this. And then you want to get your plastic wrap, cover this as best you can. It's probably going to need to sit for at least a half an hour to an hour, depending on how warm your kitchen is. And that's it for that. Okay, my cinnamon rolls are ready, so I'm going to take the plastic wrap off. This is actually slightly overproofed because video editing takes way longer than I thought it would. But this is what you're aiming for. And it looks like I made it all the way to the edge of the pan, which is cool. So make sure your oven, while you have your cinnamon rolls wrapped, is set to 365. After it beeps, make sure you let it sit at that temperature for at least a good another 5 minutes before you open the oven. Because, at least with commercial baking, your oven's not really at that temperature, even if your oven reads at that temperature internally. It needs to sit for a few more minutes to actually be at that temperature. And I can't really explain the science behind it, but I can tell you that if it beeps and then you open up the door, your heat is going to escape, and so your temperature is actually going to be lower than what it's supposed to be. So if it's sitting for a few minutes longer at the temp that it's supposed to be at, the temperature doesn't drop as much when you open up the oven and put your product in. So we're gonna put these in right now. I don't use egg wash or anything. You can if you want, and you can look up how to do egg wash if that's what you want to do. I personally don't do that. You can look at my nasty ass oven over there. Woohoo! And I'm gonna set it for 15 minutes. And you're probably wondering why my oven says 340 instead of 365. It's because I have it on convection bake, and for some reason when I do that, it drops the temperature on the reading, but the inside is still 365. So we're going to take a look in 15 minutes and see what these look like. While your cinnamon rolls are in the oven, you can make your royal icing or glaze to put on your cinnamon rolls. I just did a cup of powdered sugar, a pinch of salt, and 2 tablespoons of milk. And then when the cinnamon rolls come out, you can just drizzle that on. Wait.